Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how easy it is to do wool applique. Now what you're seeing on the table and behind me is the Woolly Candle Mat Club designed exclusively here at Shabby Fabrics. Now in the past, when you've joined a Block of the Month or club, we have had exclusive Facebook groups open only to those that were part of that club. And you know what? We've decided you have to pay for way too much video content out in the world today. We want to make all of this free and available to you, whether you're in that club or not. We love teaching people how to do things, and sometimes just being able to see a process, you can decide, hey, I want to do that, or I don't think that one's for me, but maybe something else that we're offering may be of interest to you. So I just wanted to first say, if you are already in the Woolly Candle Mat Club, or maybe thinking about that, or even just thinking about doing a different wool project altogether, what we'll be covering today will be relevant to you. So if you are in the Candle Mat Club, of course, you'll have a kit that looks just like mine. I'll be going specifically over the October project and just showing you from start to finish what we do to be able to get all of the beautiful wool put together with a little touch of hand embroidery, stitching our applique shapes down, and getting our project finished up and ready for display for each month of the year. So just know that if you've got a friend that maybe has been interested in wool applique and they're like, I don't know about that, bring them along, tag a friend. Crafting is fun by yourself, but even better when you have a group of friends doing things with you. So I started off my sewing experience for the first 30 years, never even touching wool. I'm like, I don't do that. I don't know anything about that. And then a friend of mine showed me just how fun it is to work with wool. And I've been hooked ever since. So I thought it was time for us to record a video and just show you what is the process. What's the difference? You'll be surprised about the similarities, and it's even easier. So let's get started. I'll put these out of the way. So just like any project, of course, you're going to start off with a pattern. And when you're part of our club, of course, you'll have a full color image of your project each month and full-size diagrams, including reverse for fusible applique, as well as a layout diagram. It just helps you be able to be successful and really enjoy the process of working with wool. So that's what you'll be expecting. Now, I don't know if you're working on a project at home, maybe a completely different project from a book, but not every book has a layout diagram, and you'll see soon why having a layout diagram is really helpful for you to be able to pre-assemble units using a light box, an applique pressing sheet, your layout diagram, so that when we are moving them onto the background, we're moving them onto that background as assembled units, making it much more accurate. So let's jump right ahead. Again, if you're in our program, you'll want to be starting off with your wool cutting diagram, and we're letting you know that for your green texture, for example, you should have a 2x3, and that's where you'll be tracing your shapes. So step one, make sure that when you get your kit each month, that you're definitely checking that you have everything that you need to get started. So let's put that aside for just a moment. Now, we need to figure out how are we going to transfer these shapes? What are we going to do to get those shapes onto the wool? Well, you've got a couple of choices. Some people like to use freezer paper. My preferred method is Heat and Bond Light. I love having my shapes have a fusible webbing on the back so that they're not going to move. I've got some pre-cut, but I'll show you the process that will follow. So that this is the witch's hat. There's the Heat and Bond on the back. So if this is completely new to you, let me just jump right into that so that there's no step missed. And I know if you've done fusible applique, you're like, I already know this. For those things, go ahead and just skip ahead in the video. We don't want to go over things that you already know. So we'll get our light box turned on. This is the wafer 2, by the way. The wafer 1 would probably work for this project, but I like the wafer 2. It gives me just a little bit more breathing room. So you'll want to grab some Heat and Bond Light. We'll turn our light box on. And I can see the shapes. Those are already reversed for fusible applique for you. So let me grab a pen. You'll definitely want to use a permanent marker. If you watched any of my videos, my go-to pen is the friction pen, but the problem when you're tracing a shape that you're going to be cutting out and ironing down is that as soon as you touch that hot iron to the friction pen, the lines will be gone. So just grab a Micron pen, this is just a plain old pen, and we'll just begin to draw that. You know what else might be really helpful for you as well, because we have cut your wool very specific, is you can even, if you're inclined, draw just a light box around the shape of that. It's certainly optional if you'd like. And then you just roughly cut around. So let's do that as well. That's always nice to have an extra pair of scissors around that's not your best scissors to just roughly cut around the heat and bond. Although I have been using my Kai scissors to cut out heat and bond and they never seem to dull. So I don't historically switch to a different pair of scissors when I need to cut out heat and bond light. Now paper is a different story. I don't use my best scissors to cut out regular paper. All right, so we said, well, we're going to grab, we already know that's our green. We've outlined our wool. Again, that's probably an extra step. That's optional. We can see that it's going to fit. We go ahead, we iron that down on the medium setting, let it cool. Now is when you'll go ahead and cut everything out on the actual lines. And I've done that ahead of time. So I can just start grabbing those out so they'll look just like that. You can certainly at this point, if you'd like, once it's cooled, just roll this back just like that. When I roll it back, that heat and bond releases and you can see that shine there. That's the glue. So that's my preferred method to prepare the shapes. Now, let's talk about what's this business about this layout diagram and why is it important? When I first started doing applique, and that was, of course, with regular cotton fabric, I didn't know anything about light boxes. I didn't know anything about applique pressing sheets. I just said, well, I'll just eyeball it and bring one piece at a time down to the background. And the shape was in the ballpark, but it wasn't quite as accurate as I would have liked. And that's the beauty of this combination. So what are we talking about? So let's look at our layout diagram real quick. So with the layout diagram, I'll put this off to the side. You can see the pieces are numbered, and there's also some dashed lines there. Piece number 1 means that's the piece that goes down first, followed by piece number 2, which is the band on the witch's hat, and the star is piece 3. So you don't have to guess which piece goes down first. Now, with something this basic, it's quite obvious, right? But I've done applique, especially with cotton, where I've had 50 to 60 to even 80 layers in one applique block, and it was a chore to figure out what is my piece number 1. It was so much analysis of the diagram, which was not numbered. And that's where we knew when we were going to start creating our own patterns, just to make it easier for the person who wants to be able to spend their spare time doing their favorite hobby, that they can just jump right into it. We'll let you know what pieces are the furthest behind, and that's your piece number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on and so forth. So those are numbered for the hat. And then moving on to our pumpkin, we have piece number 1, which is our stem. We have our, looks like our leaf, and then our main pumpkin, kind of that pumpkin wedge in the front, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and we pre-assemble. So let's go ahead. We'll get our iron heating up to medium. On regular cotton, I always use a medium setting. Sometimes with wool, just because wool is thicker, I find sometimes the medium setting isn't enough, and I go ahead and go up to even the next hottest setting. So if you're finding that those settings that you traditionally use with cotton fabric, that the glue is not melting and merging together, just go ahead and increase the heat on your iron. So that's just, you're going through more material. So that was a learning curve for me when I switched over and started doing some wool applique. So I wanted to be sure to mention that to you. So we will need to use our diagram. So the sequence is light box, layout diagram. Before I put this on, one of the things that I like to do is first make sure, do I have everything I need? And let's go ahead we will build, let's look at our, I'll get my glasses. Let's look at our pumpkin. So I'm going to turn my layout diagram so that it's oriented straight on to me. So you just turn that to what works for you. Step one, of course, is let's go ahead and we can get that fusible webbing off all of our pieces. Sometimes once you lay the applique pressing sheet, it's a little bit harder to see the numbers. So I have found it helpful to kind of do a little bit of a mock-up of a pre-assembly off to the side. So that way when I start moving the pieces over, I already know that sequence that's going to happen. So I'll show you what I mean here in just a moment. Let's get that peeled off. Okay. One thing that I've noticed when my husband or my kids come in and I'm crafting, creating things at home, and I'm having to peel things off, I'm like, can you help me out? So if you've got some helpers at home and they love to be able to jump in and participate, this is a great one for them to be able to help you peel that paper off the back, and then they're able to be a part of the project, which I love very much. I love to include my family whenever I can in the things that I create. So looking at our sequence, we know that our stem, let's take a look at that. First, I understand the orientation. Looks like that's going to go in the back. That's going to go to the side. I can almost put those up there, I think. That's going to go first and second. And then we'll have our big pumpkin in the back. This is going to be in the front. Of course, the smile really doesn't necessarily matter, the sequence of that. That's our witch's hat. We'll put that off to the side. And I think I'm missing one little piece here. Let me find that so we can complete the face. There we go. Those little pieces. Hey, that's another thing. If you are getting ready, if you cut things out in advance, put them in a baggie straight away, you can imagine it's very easy to lose that. Now, for smaller shapes like that, keep your wool. If you do lose a shape, there's a good chance you'll have enough there in your kit to be able to recut something. Okay, so we have our iron heating up. We're going to go ahead and turn the light box. Now, I have to keep mine dialed down just a little bit for video. But with this particular light box, you can bring it up brighter and dimmer. It has a lot of sophistication in this light box. So if you are looking for one, this is certainly one I would encourage you to consider so you can get the lighting exactly where you want it. So I'm going to push this down. Now, this mat that I'm using, this is the Applifuse mat. There's two sizes. This is the smaller one. Notice me pushing it down. There's a tackiness about this that it's not going away. It's the coolest feature. This is by far the best applique sheet for wool, hands down. There's other applique pressing sheets that I have used with wool, and I do not like them nearly as much because it doesn't release the wool fully to me. And there's a little bit of the glue it kind of starts to separate. If you're going to be doing wool applique and using an applique pressing sheet, you want one that's like this, like this brand. And this is the Applifuse. It's got that kind of tackiness to it. And when it loses its tackiness, here's the coolest thing. Throw it in your dishwasher, run it through the cycle, it's tacky again, and you get to use it forever. So it's truly a one-time purchase. So all right, next is our stems going down. And I can see, now this is the part that can get a little bit tricky, is notice how, I put that upside down, I think. Let's take a look. Sometimes I'm like, ooh, does it go, I want to review that with you. I wasn't sure if this was up or this was up. Hey, if you have to take that away, take it away. Notice it's not going anywhere. And I can say, okay, it's not like this, it's like this. And while I lose most of the sight of the pumpkin, I can now see the bottom scoop and the upper portion. Do you see how that works? Now, some of it will be a little bit blind. The face will be completely covered up, but that's where you can refer to your photo to be able to know where certain pieces go, what their placement should be. All right, so let's just position that right back there. This piece goes here. We confirmed that. This piece goes here. Now what you can do, and what I'd recommend, is just do this part so far. Don't even put the face on yet. Let's do that in just a little bit. We have to move this off the light box, and I'm just going to let my iron sit there. Now, as you can see, the face is completely blocked by the wool. You can still use the layout diagram to assist you in a certain way, but that's really where the photo can come in and be a great assistance. And you start to just say, okay, that seems to be about a relative thing. The main thing is that the bulk of it, the main part of that, is put together and merged as one unit. And now it's beginning to cool down. In fact, what we can do real quick while that's cooling is we'll just quickly go do our little witch's hat there. That's, you know, and you can see, I don't even have that here. This one is pretty intuitive. You can see that this just needs to kind of sit in the slot. I'm just looking at the photo. And again, we'll just go ahead, scoot that down actually. I want that to sit right in that little saddle right there. I think applique pressing sheets are one of the most amazing inventions. There was even a block that I had seen years ago. It was one of the most complicated, detailed applique blocks I'd ever seen in my life. 212 pieces. Can you even imagine doing that without an applique pressing sheet and getting the orientation right? There's just no way that would be possible. So I am grateful for advancements in technology that make our hobby of creating and crafting even more fun. Now look at this. I want you to see this from the side camera. This is now one unit. There's nothing about that. What makes this just amazing is when I now bring it to the background of my project, it's one thing. Now I have a choice. I can go ahead and put the faces on. In fact, we can do that. And I can do that off the project again, or bring it onto the project and put the face on later. That's really your call. Now I can also use this just kind of like, okay, which is the left eye and which is the right eye? And what's the orientation? I still get to use this layout diagram to help me. I don't have to guess which piece goes where. And it's like, okay, you could get as granular if you wanted is to measure down, or you can find your preferred spots. Some people will lay this back on here just like this, and they kind of take a peek. They kind of look. I know my hand is probably in the way a little bit, and they kind of just take a look, and you can see that this is just kind of stacked right on top of the diagram, just like that. And I can take a quick look and see. Now it's not as easy up above, but at least that's something. I'm gonna put that up here. So let's just double check. We have that correct. That's our nose. Yes and yes. Oop, I bumped that. Let's double check. Yep. You know, every time that I've not double checked something, sometimes I get lucky and sometimes I don't. I have learned that with cotton applique, if I make a mistake, I can sometimes heat that up and it will release and I can make an adjustment. I have found that to be not as easy to do with wool. So you really want to make sure you're where you believe you should be. So we'll let that warm up and then we'll bring out our background, but first we have to be able to make that background. So how do we go about making that background? I know we so would love to have laser cut wool for you, and you maybe have said, why don't you provide laser cut wool? Well, we've tried that here at Shabby Fabrics, and I know if you've ever smelled burnt hair, it's probably one of the most unpleasant smells, and of course, wool is hair. So we have tried this on the lasers with very little success where it didn't leave quite a foul odor. It did make the cut, but it's nothing that you'd want to have that odor in your project. So we know it's a little bit of extra work to be doing the cutting out yourself, but we think that it is also a very enjoyable process, and there's not a lot of that to be done. It's not a lot of projects or a lot of pieces that you have to cut out. So how do we do this? If this isn't cut out for us, very easy. My favorite, absolutely favorite of all time, freezer paper is the Cut-Rite. The reason I love it is it's so thick, it's so heavy, you'll actually only have to do this one time. So know that for the small scallop, what you'll do, I'm going to grab a couple pieces out real quick. You'll only need to really, even if you're in this program and you have 12 to make or get to make, you really only need to make these scallops one time. They will work for all 12 of them. So I'm going to turn the light box on, and you can see that that inner circle, or that inner scallop, I should say, fits, but you can see the outer will not. No worries, I'll show you how to deal with that. You're simply going to trace on that line with a permanent marker, cut out on that line, and this is what you'll be getting, because it's going to look just like that. It's got an adhesive characteristic to it. You can, once you get ready to place that on your wool, doesn't make sense to go ahead and draw around it, right? You're going to want to go ahead and iron that down. And what's amazing about this freezer paper is it'll just release and iron over and over again. Now for the larger shape, where we cannot get the bigger scallop on one sheet, what we've done is we just took two of those and we went ahead and taped those together. So that way we have what we need. Then you'll go ahead, take that onto here, and you'll be able to draw around that. And again, cut out, and that's what that would look like. You've got that little crease in the middle. So let's move right along. So again, if whether you're working in the Woolly Candle Mat project or maybe something else at home, this technique will work with any time you're trying to just build a bigger template. Just tape more paper, more of the pages of the freezer paper together, and you can make your template as big as you'd like. Now with this specific project in your kit, of course, you have, this is pure wool and lots of hand dye. We know that wool projects are more expensive. Wool is more expensive. Most hand-dyed wool today is retailing from $90 to $100 a yard. Yes, that is real. When we decided to start bringing projects into Shabby Fabrics and buying wool, I was staggered at the cost, but knowing the process, there are no two pieces alike. I've been able to get my hands into dyeing wool. It's amazing how much work it is and fun, but it's true, there are no two batches alike, and each piece is truly made by hand, and it takes quite some time to develop the dye and process the dye, boil the water. The whole process is amazing, but it gives it this just incredible characteristic. So you'll have not only commercially dyed wools, but a lot of hand dye that makes it just come to life. So where I want to start with this is, of course, you're using these to cut out your applique shapes. We already went over that, but these are going to be your scallops. You'll have this scallop here. You have your, in this particular case, this, and on the back you have wool again. There's a lot of wool in your kit. What I'd like you to do, because you know wool is a premium, is be very economical about your wool. So for example, even though we know we're going to add all of our applique to this scallop first, what I would encourage you to do is go ahead and grab your smaller scallop and your larger scallop, and let me move some of these things out of the way now that they're all merged together and cooled down. How fun is that? All ready to go, and looks like, oh, look, this happened. Do you see how my star didn't get attached? Why? I forgot to remove the paper. No problem. If you're like, why is that not sticking? Well, probably human error like I did, and I just simply forgot to remove the paper. So just take the paper off, and when you get ready to put that down to the background, we'll just go ahead and put that star down. So as I was getting back to, rather than you just putting this down and cutting around, you might be compromising your larger black backing piece. So I'd like to encourage you to go ahead and orient those so that they're both on the page. Then go ahead and iron that down. If you do splice that, go ahead and avoid that tape and just iron outside of that region where the tape is. The tape can melt under the iron, so go ahead and just skip that section and iron out here. It just needs to be able to be in position, and then you'll use your nice thick either Kai or Bordeaux, Karen K. Buckley scissors, or whatever scissors you have to make as clean of a cut as possible, knowing that the line you cut is what you're going to be. This is, you don't turn those edges under in wool. What you see is what you're going to get. So go ahead and get those cut out, and you'll repeat that process. You'll remove this, you'll grab your purple, and again, iron that down, and go ahead and cut that out, and you'll be ready to go. So let's bring out the, I wanted to show you. Okay, so I wanted to show you the background. Of course, there's nothing on the back. We haven't stitched that down. That's our next video. I'm literally going to take you all the way through the journey of how do you open up your kit, how do you trace everything, cut it out, pre-assemble it, get it on here, sew it down. We're going to talk about hand embroidery in some separate videos. So we're going to take you all the way through the journey. So here is where you can, again, eyeball it. Nothing wrong with that. You can use this. I'm going to get that out of the way. I like to actually use my layout diagram. When I put this on here, you know, we basically have it kind of stacked right on top of here. I'll put that star aside that I managed to miss. And I can kind of lift that up, and I can see, hopefully my head's out of the way, I can see that when I lift that back, I believe that hat is right over. If I could see through that black background, if that wasn't there, I believe I'm at that spot. Once you believe you're there, I'm going to come here. I'm going to be smart this time. Let's do two things at the same time. I'm going to iron that down as well. We'll go ahead. Let me see if I need to iron. I'm going to heat that up just a bit more. I'm going to hold that down so you can see the process is actually very fun. It's fun to build the shapes. It's fun to bring them onto the background. And then once it's down to the background, even more fun. You get the decision of what stitch am I going to stitch this down to the background? Do I want to use a blanket stitch? Do I want to use a straight stitch? That's where the thread comes in. So again, if you're in the program, I'll talk specifically about these thread sets. But if you're doing something else from home, what I would encourage you to do with wool is use a 12 weight. Weave piece quilt fabrics with 50 weight cotton. Historically, 50 weight is typical. And I have used 50 weight cotton with wool, and what I find is it just disappears. And it's really nice to be able to use a thicker thread, a 12 weight. This is sulky, and that's what this beautiful thread set is all about. This will serve the entire program of all 12 of the candle mats. And you'll want to be using, you can use a 50 weight in the bobbin if you'd like, but you want to be using a size 100 super nonstick needle because that needle is bigger to be able to handle the thicker diameter of this thread. So in our next video, which is part of our Candle Mat Club, again, if you're not even in the Woolly Candle Mat Club, still just join us. Just see what is this that they're doing over at Shabby Fabrics, where you can see I'll be doing some straight stitch. I'll be getting that beautiful 12 weight into the machine. I'll be using the Bernina, and I'll have the super nonstick size 100. We'll try to get in close. You'll see that's a bigger eye of that needle. We'll get that threaded, and we'll start stitching around those shapes. Now you can absolutely still use that thread by hand if you prefer. So if you're like, I don't really like to stitch those shapes down, I'd like to do hand just tacking down. You could of course do a simple whip stitch if you'd like, where that's more of a blind stitch. And you could use a more subtle thread, but if you want to be able to have that thread be part of the beauty of the project, That's where the 12 weight comes in. And then for our third video in the series, as you can see, there's a little bit of hand embroidery, and I want to be able to go with how do we mark on black wool? What is this stitching? There's very, very simple stitching that I'll go over with you as well. And of course, there's some fun button embellishments on certain parts of our candle mat. There's 12 different ones, as you know. Some have, I think most have a touch of hand embroidery, and some have button embellishments as well. So I know this has been a longer video. I'm excited about wool applique. I love it. I love cotton and wool. Now, you know, all those decades, I missed out on the fun of wool. So, you know, with the Woolly Candle Mat Club, you can either join the club, and if there's kits left over, we'll be offering those as individual sale. They'll be a little bit more than the club price. So there is definitely a savings if you want to be jumping into that club. So I'll see you on the next video where we'll be going over how to stitch those shapes down to our background. I'll see you then.